Everyone looks up to someone. Everyone has that inspirational figure in their life. And for many, that person is Jessica Berman. She joins me today, Deputy Commissioner of the NLL, the National Lacrosse League. And this is going to be an opportunity to spotlight her career, her trials and tribulations, what she's been able to overcome, and now becoming the first woman to hold the title of a Deputy Commissioner at any professional sports league in North America. I'm Bryan Fenley, a national anchor at Fox Sports Radio. Jessica, thank you so much for doing this. I know you have a lot on your plate. You are one of the hardest working people in the sports industry and certainly are being asked to do a lot of interviews. I wanted to start here because I know that you have two sons, and there was one interview where you did where when you were trying to figure out if the NLL was the right thing for you to do, one of your sons said, "You have to take this role because you are a pioneer." What
Yes,
did both of your two sons do in terms of challenging you and making you a better version of you in the sports industry?
I love that question, and thank you for that amazing introduction. I might need to ask you to do that for me on hard days at work when I need some ego pumping.
Sure.
Um, so yeah, my kids. I really do believe that my children. I guess I can only speak from my personal experience, but my children and my role as a mother has really helped me in my professional career. I think, contrary to what some people think in terms of work life balance and the idea that your professional life can be sacrificed by commitments in the personal space, in my experience, it's actually been the opposite. I think my children have taught me about communication, about empathy, about really truly imparting the why when I need for them to uh, when I need to build consensus in my households, like you do on a board or you do with any stakeholder group. If you can figure out a way to have a 10 and a 13-year-old understand your why, then you've really mastered communication skills at the most basic level. So, certainly all of that, as well as I call them my Gen Z sample size of two, always qualifying the fact that I recognize that it's subjective and anecdotal, but seeing what they do every day with their personal time, what interests them, how they engage with content has been really helpful for me in my career. Although I like to think of myself as young and young at heart and young in the way that I experience life and various different activities, it is quite different from the next generation of consumers and fans. And then lastly, just as a mom of two young boys, you referenced the comment from my older son, Noah, who's now 13. And when he said that to me, he was 11. And I'm very conscious of setting the right example for them, of uh, being a hard worker and setting goals and maintaining your priorities and holding yourself accountable and others accountable to high standards. And so I think for all those reasons, they've helped me. They've fueled my career, despite the fact that at times, technically, they might take a couple of minutes here and there when I otherwise would be working. I think net, they've added value even in my professional life.
What's also added value in your professional life is all the quotes that you have. You have behind you, you can see some of them, a lot of inspirational phrases. Why do you feel that when you look at those, and what in particular are ones that stand out to you, that you feel like you can reach a better version of yourself?
Yeah, well, the one right behind me that is front and center when I sit at my desk is Nelson Mandela's quote, "Sport has the power to change the world." And the reason that I have that quote front and center is because it really is truly what motivates me every day. It's the reason I chose to work in the sports industry. I recognized at a very young age that there are very few things in our social fabric that really truly unite communities and break down barriers. And I had the unique experience as a teenager of experiencing sport in that context. and decided that in some way, shape, or form, I wanted to be part of that ecosystem and be part of an industry that had the power to truly change the world. So that for me is my guiding principle from a work perspective. I guess from a leadership standpoint, one of the other ones that sits behind me is Ruth Bader Ginsburg's quote. She's an idol for me. I like to celebrate the fact that we both grew up in Brooklyn. We attended the same school actually up until grade 12. She went to the same school as me until 8th grade, which was a private Jewish school in Brooklyn called East Midwood Jewish Center. And then we both went to James Madison High School. And I was in the law program at James Madison High School where she went. And she invited my senior class to come and sit in her chambers when I was in law school. I've had opportunities to sort of cross paths with her a few times in my life. Anytime she was speaking in New York, I would go and see her speak. She's definitely a Shiro for me. And that quote is, fight for the things you care about, but do it in a way that will lead others to join you. And I think for me, in both my personal and my professional life, a lot of what we do, as I alluded to earlier, is consensus building and trying to get people to join you in your initiatives or areas that are of importance to you. But I learned, and think Ruth Bader Ginsburg did this really well in her career, that you can do that more effectively by making friends and by building relationships, and that approaching consensus building in a confrontational or combative way is not going to get you to a long-term solution. You might win the battle, but lose the war. And I subscribe to the philosophy that we can do more together than we can separately. And so that for me is a super important guiding principle. I could go on and on. I have,
I love it.
even not behind me, I have quotes actually everywhere in my house and on the wall. And I try to place them in strategic places as cues for things that I value in life.
What's a quote that you might have coined that you go to?
Ooh, that's tough. You mean that I made up?
That you made up? Or
Oh, I actually can give you one because
okay.
it's been quoted back to me. Although I don't know that I can take credit for it, because someone who in my life, I'm pretty sure, is the person who either said this to me or gave me the inspiration to articulate it. But I have used the phrase, when emotion is high, cognition is low. That is something that I typically use to remind myself and others that there's a time and a place to address issues. And so whether it's from a self-awareness perspective, for me, knowing that I'm having an emotional reaction, and so to be aware of those cues and say, let me take a time out. This is probably not the best. I'm probably not thinking as rationally as I otherwise could be. So let me revisit this when I feel a little more centered. Or alternatively, when I'm dealing with someone and they're clearly emotional, to recognize that they're probably not bringing their best self forward. And so to just choose to not let that in and, focus on moving past that situation. So, that's one that I say a lot as my team and my children remind me often. They're like, oh, there she goes again. When emotion is high, cognition is low. And I always do this with my hands. When emotion is high, cognition is low. So that's one that comes to mind.
One of the many quotes that you have been able to put forth in your career and your life. We're joined by Jessica Berman, Deputy Commissioner of the National Lacrosse League. I'm Bryan Fenley, a national anchor at Fox Sports Radio. This is the On to Something podcast. Now, Jessica, over your left shoulder, you pointed out that quote where it's fight for something you care for. How about you fighting for someone you care for? 2013 and your husband, and how you were there for him through some challenging times.
Yeah. I guess for those who aren't familiar with my personal story, in 2013, August 4th, I guess we're coming up on the anniversary. Um, my husband, who I had been married to since 2005, and I describe him as the picture of health. He was in the middle of training for his third or fourth marathon, and I call him the whole wheat turkey no mayo guy. You know, he ate healthy, he took care of himself, he prioritized sleep, like he did everything right, and was completely asymptomatic, no warning signs. And one Sunday morning, he had a stroke, a massive hemorrhagic stroke, and ended up in a coma for 7 weeks. And our children were 5 and 2 at the time. I was working at the NHL, had just actually concluded the 2012-13 collective bargaining negotiations. So had just gone through labor war and was beginning the war on the impact of the stroke and what had happened to Brad. And he was in a hospital for 4 months and basically had to relearn every life function that we all take for granted every day. And I just spent I wouldn't be honest if I didn't sort of share that in the beginning. Of course, I experienced every emotion you can imagine: depression and sadness and anxiety and anger and all those things. But I tend to be, and this was obviously a shining example of that, the kind of person who really, I can't let myself wallow for too long. It's just not in my nature. So, like most things in my life, I sort of like made a plan and said, okay, I'm going to wallow. I'm going to let myself wallow for another, like, however many days. And then I'm going to pick myself up and make the best of the situation. And me and my children and our family and our community and our friends and colleagues and so many people supported us. We started a nonprofit initiative at the time and fundraised to build a rehabilitation program for people with brain and spinal cord injuries at Burke Rehabilitation Hospital in New York. And we raised $800,000 in a year to help them to really revolutionize the way they approach rehabilitation, particularly for brain injuries. And Brad certainly benefited from that. So we just didn't take no for an answer every step of the way. And it was a good testament to the power of community and knowing that everyone was supporting us and just staying focused on our goals.
Jessica, you remind me a lot of my own mom. My dad passed away when I was 16 from cancer, but he was given a death sentence when I was 12. Ended up surviving 4 more years, and it wasn't possible without the support of my mom and staying up all night long and being there for him and going across the country and finding whatever it took. Whenever a doctor said no, she said yes, we'll find a way. There is always a way. And for you, I can see a lot of those traits within you as well. And I want to go back to when you were in college. You hosted a sports radio show. What
Yeah.
was that? What
Where'd
was
you find that?
Hey,
That's
where did I
that's
find that? Look, I don't want to waste your time. I want to make sure I do my research. So I did some digging, did some research because I know how many different directions you are pulled into with all of the different commitments as you get ready for your season coming up in a few months.
my dog is barking at the
Oh,
moment.
that's fine. I'm surprised my dog is not barking, but
I'm just gonna let him out because
do it.
otherwise
Yeah,
he's gonna keep barking.
for sure.
Yes. So I guess the longer story about me hosting my own sports talk radio show is that I always knew I wanted to work in sports. And I guess for those who are listening who are considering a career in sports, for me, I approached it as process of elimination. And I really sort of methodically tried various different things across my life in the form of different internships throughout college and even high school, really to say, okay, is this something is this the role I wish to play in the sports industry, or is there a better role or a different role? So that was part of my process elimination. I don't think it was my calling in life. It was fun, and I will credit them for helping me to shed um, some of my Brooklyn accent, which used to be
Yeah.
much more pronounced than it currently is. But it was really fun, and I enjoyed it, and it was an opportunity for me to really see a whole side of the business that I probably would have otherwise never understood.
How fun is it for you to work with Nick Sakavich, commissioner of the NLL, and just to continue to expand and grow what you're doing with the NLL? It's fascinating. You're adding more teams. You've just picked up a nice rights deal with TSN. And so, being such a big part of a rapid explosion here, what is that like? The dynamic between you and Nick and creating ideas and all the excitement that lays forth in the league's future?
Working with Nick has been a gift to my professional development. Um, he and I thought this was the case as we were in the sort of get to know you phase, and my recruitment into this role was, I think, quite non-traditional. Nick and I got to know each other over the course of, I think it was like 6 to 8 months, meeting for lunch, meeting for coffee, having conversations about our vision for growth, the Challenger property, how we approach leadership, culture, sports role in society. And I think what I learned through that experience, and it's honestly been no different since I've joined the league, is that he's the kind of leader with me and in our interactions who genuinely enjoys uh, different perspectives. Like, he and I really truly balance each other out very well. I think we see situations differently, and I think we both acknowledge that that's a good thing. And I often want his perspective on things, knowing that he will probably come at it in a very different way than I would, and vice versa. So we have immense respect. And it's really, for me, my passion point in sports is about diversity, equity, and inclusion. And so for me, working with Nick is the epitome of that. It's the model of diversity, equity, and inclusion, because he really embodies every single day in his relationship with me the fact that we're better when we bring different perspectives together. And I think, I'd like to think we model that for the organization and for our senior team. I know I feel that way every day, and I'm so appreciative both for the opportunity to contribute to our growth and our decisions collectively, but also the opportunity to learn from him, knowing that he was raised with very different training than I was. And so I really do think some people have said we're like yin and yang. We sort of like balance each other out. And I think there's a lot of truth to that.
Jessica Berman is with us. I'm Bryan Fenley. What is the one outside the box, innovative thought that you have that you want to think about using or are using with the NLL that no other sports league in North America has done yet, that shows your ingenuity and shows that you always want to be, in a metaphorical sense, ahead of the game?
Mm, good question. Well, I don't know if no other sports league is doing it in North America, but what comes to mind, having not prepared an answer for that question, one thought that comes to mind is that I'm so amazed with our athletes' uh, athleticism, and uh, they're really like acrobats when they are doing their sort of trick shots and things like that. They tend to be the plays that make Sports Center top 10, or perform the best on social, watching our guys like do flips while they're, making a pass, or, they're like horizontal while they're scoring. And I have this like idea of really fostering that with some interesting content around that. Really like tapping into the things that our players do sort of authentically in the daily pursuit of their elite athleticism, is one thought. I would guess another thought, which maybe isn't surprising knowing my background in labor relations and collective bargaining, is that I really wish to have our relationship with our union be a true partnership. And that's not just like, technically how we share revenues or anything like that. I mean like day to day, that we can come to each other when we have issues or challenges, that we know and have confidence that we can work through it, that we can be transparent and clear about the issues that are super important to us, that we really need uh, compromise from the other side. We have new union leadership as of October of this past year. And, we've obviously gone through an unprecedented time in our history. And I think our relationship is off to a really great start. And I would love nothing more than the NLL and NLLPA relationship to be celebrated as the most collaborative in all of professional sports.
Love that. Final question. Jessica Berman, Deputy Commissioner of the National Lacrosse League. I'm Bryan Fenley, an anchor at Fox Sports Radio. The relationship with yourself, you talk about how you're amazed at the athletes and those you work with. And I know you're very humble, and I know you're a go-getter, and you work so many hours and that you're able to get stuff done in a day. But what are you most amazed in when you look at yourself and looking at your relationship with yourself and being able to sit back and say, wow, I've done this? Where does that resonate with you most?
Mm. Um, I think the thing, I was recently asked this question. So I've actually thought about it. It was framed in a little bit of a different context, but um, what is the thing that makes me sort of like uniquely me in terms of what I do well? Um, and I would say two things. Uh, neither of which are like hard skills; they're more soft skills. The first is, I think I'm, and probably to a fault, insanely efficient. And again, that can be taken to an extreme that's probably unhealthy. But I really do am compelled. I feel compelled to maximize every minute of my day. Um, that's not only for work. If I get 20 minutes free, my team knows, like sometimes I'll dash out for a quick run, or I'll hook up my Peloton and do a 10-minute abs workout. Like I really try to get the most out of every day. And I think it allows me to accomplish a lot. So that would be one thing. The second thing is really my network of professionals and colleagues and friends. My mom, when I was little, used to call me a people collector. Um,
Ah,
and, someone else recently told me that I should say I'm a people connector, which is much more strategic. And I agree with her. And when she said that, and I do that, I sort of, whether you call it like a matchmaker, or, whether it's in the context of a deal or a context of a job, or if I hear about a job and I'm like, oh, run through my Rolodex, like, I think this person would be really good for that. I really enjoy sort of tapping into my network, whether it's like for business, core business, or for, you know, someone's next career move. Or, a friend of mine launched a podcast, and she was, after she interviewed me, I thought about like four people I thought would be great for her to interview.
yeah.
I really like connecting people. So those are the sort of the two things that I think I recognize as being unique characteristics for me that have helped me to get to where I am today.
Jessica Berman, giving, hardworking, inspirational, ahead of her time, and someone which so many are motivated by when they see what she does. I happen to be one of those. Jessica Berman, Deputy Commissioner of the National Lacrosse League. I'm Bryan Fenley, and anchored Fox Sports Radio. Thank you so much, Jessica, for allowing me to spotlight you and to introduce more people to the amazing work you are doing.
Thank you so much. It was such a pleasure to chat with you.